Good afternoon, everyone. Keith Tebow here from FRCMedia. Thank you for joining us today. We've had a lot of conversations about what the opening of schools will look like this fall. And there's still a lot of unknowns as we are in the end of July. We still have about a month or so before schools were scheduled to open. There's going to be changes around this. We've heard, from the superintendent on many occasions. But today we want to hear from the teachers in Fall River. I'm pleased to be joined right now by Rebecca Cusick. She's the president of the Fall River Educators Association. Rebecca, thank you for joining me. How are you?
I'm well. How about yourself?
I am doing well. Let's get right into, I guess, what is really new that came up this week. The state announced that there was an agreement between teachers unions, like the ones you represent, and schools that is going to be calling for a 10-day delay in the start of schools, with schools opening no later than September 16th. From your view as a union head, was this a good move to make, and how will it help some of your rank and file members get prepared for when we do have a plan for the fall?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if we think about reopening the economy, we phased in how we reopened everything from restaurants to stores to whether people could gather in public. We had certain benchmarks and criteria that we had to meet to get to the next phase. And I think that by providing these 10 days to districts, what they have done is allowed schools to phase in reopening in a way that is responsible and safe. So those 10 days can be dedicated to training staff, as well as to communicating with parents, to learning about how to best engage kids remotely. When we return, we're going to have a lot of new safety protocols. A lot of things are going to look very different, and staff need to be on the same page. We have to have common understandings as to what those protocols are. And then we also have to be able to communicate those protocols to parents and to students. And in order to do that well, I think we're going to need those 10 days to plan and prepare for the kids to re-enter the buildings.
Yeah, I know in some of the media reports around this 10-day extension, there were some items that the commissioner didn't address that was important for some of the members in the unions. Do you still feel that there's still some concerns that still need to be met prior to whenever that opening day is?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we have done 2 surveys of our membership. We represent about 850 educators in Fall River, and both surveys were pretty similar in that the membership is sort of split on where they're at in this moment of time. I think that probably half or a little more than half are willing to engage in a hybrid model. And I'd say about 45% of our members, just again, this is a snapshot survey, are preferring a remote model. And the reasons for that vary anywhere from they have pre-existing health conditions and they're not quite sure how protected they'll be in the buildings, even if there are masks. And I think that the other concern they have is if they live with somebody who has a pre-existing health condition. You're right about the unions. When the Mass Teachers Association and the other unions that joined them with the Commissioner of Education met, they were insisting on all buildings being inspected to make sure that the air quality was safe upon return, because we know this virus is airborne. I know the superintendent has a plan for addressing HVAC systems in the buildings. I think as we learn more about what that plan is and what the hybrid plan looks like, I'm hoping people start to feel more comfortable. But definitely, there are health concerns that I'm not sure we're going to be able to alleviate 100%.
Now, you mentioned that you've surveyed your members here in Fall River. I'm sure you can do a survey every day and get different results depending on the situation. But do you plan on doing another sort of survey as the plans specifically in Fall River become, more concrete?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the superintendent's been great about communicating with us. Tomorrow, our bargaining team is actually sitting down with him to have an informal conversation, just to ask questions about the plan, so that when members approach us with questions or concerns, we can give them the most accurate, up-to-date information that we have. And as they get more information, I think that some people will feel more comfortable. Some people may feel less comfortable. Who knows? But we will definitely have to survey the membership again. And, then then we also have to watch the state numbers, right? So as the economy reopens and people are gathering again, we're seeing the numbers start to tick up a little bit. And I think we all have to be aware of, where those numbers are going, because that could impact all of us in reopening schools.
You actually got into a little bit of my next question, your relationship with and the union's relationship with the superintendent. It appears that I know I've been with you. You've been in our studio at Bristol Community College before with the superintendent on a couple of programs. How has that relationship been? You talked about that there's been good communication. I guess in this kind of situation, it's one of those situations where health and safety is always first and foremost. So you would think that the communication would be clear as it can be, still looking at the goal of educating our kids, right?
Yeah, I mean, we educators want to get back to the classroom. We absolutely prefer being in person with the kids to any sort of remote model. But you're right, health and safety has to be a priority, because if we become infected or our students become infected, that impacts the community in which we all live. So it's a public health issue. And as far as our relationship with the superintendent, I think both of us recognize that in these extraordinary times, if we don't work together and we don't continue to collaborate, we're never going to make it through this. I mean, this is such a complicated issue for everybody, and parents, students, staff members, that we need to communicate with each other consistently. We need to be clear and we need to be understanding. And he has done a nice job of sharing information with us and is willing to meet with us to hear what we have to say too. So we're continuing to collaborate over this, because it's probably the most important issue we've tackled together yet.
Right, absolutely. I want to go back to middle of March when COVID did hit, and we moved from in-person learning to really 100% remote learning in a short period of time. There were a lot of concerns. Talk a little bit about how your members and your fellow teachers dealt with it. We did a story with some teachers from the Vivera School back in, I believe it was April, in terms of how they were sharing packets with kids and getting the information out. Talk a little about how well your membership dealt with this challenge and really stepped forward to do the best they can in a very difficult situation.
Yeah, so in the beginning, when we first shut down, I think everybody was sort of anticipating that we were going to come back in a few weeks, right? We closed for a couple of weeks, and then we closed for 2 more weeks. And then it started to sink in. We may not be coming back for the rest of the year, which is actually what ended up happening. I have to say that the people in FRPS are amazing. We all learned very quickly how to use technology to engage with our kids and connect with our families. Our number one priority was to connect with families, to find out, was everybody okay? Were the kids, being supported at home? What could we do to make things easier for them? Checking on those social emotional needs that kids have. And then, we transitioned to a more academic phase where we did put together paper packets to ensure equity, because we know not every family has access to internet. So we had to find a way to make sure all kids could do the work. And then as we progressed even further, the school committee approved sending home Chromebooks to all families. So that helped us engage even more students than we had previously, with paper, pencil and paper hard copies being available for those families that still could not access via internet. But I give everybody a lot of credit. I don't think I would call it remote teaching, but I think I would call it crisis teaching, because, we were learning on the fly and we were figuring things out as we went. And I have to give everybody credit for being flexible and for learning quickly. But I think we could do a lot better and be more thoughtful in our approach to remote learning in the future if we find ourselves in that situation again.
Yeah. I know it's difficult for me to ask you this, but I'm going to ask you it anyway, even though it's July 29th, and things are going to change probably 20 more times between the final, proposal that's put forth. Where do you foresee this ending? Do you feel, I know the superintendent last week at the school committee meeting talked about, it's impossible really to have full in-person learning based on either a 3-foot social distance or a 6-foot social distance. And that he was talking about, depending on how many parents pick the option of having remote learning, that could be a hybrid model to start. Where do you think it could ultimately start the school year with?
So I think we'll start with that staff training time. And then we will probably transition into the hybrid model that he proposed, where we bring back the neediest population of students every day first, our special ed students, our English as a second language students, and, our kids with the most issues. And that could change. I want to say if the numbers start to creep up in the state again, I wouldn't be surprised if you see districts go completely remote. I've heard there are a few districts that are already deciding to start the year off with a remote model and then transition into a hybrid model. But if things stay the way they are, I envision us starting with a hybrid model after that training period. We are pleased with the fact that the district was responsive to our concerns about the 3 feet that DESE had recommended for distancing, and they went with the 6-foot model. I think that makes everybody feel more comfortable. And the district has also communicated that they have purchased a great deal of PPE. And that was another thing on the minds of teachers. Am I going to have to buy masks? What do I do if a student comes into class and doesn't have a mask? All of that's going to be provided. There are going to be cleaning protocols so that every classroom is sanitized. There are going to be mask breaks that are built into the day. We're going to be making sure that, windows are open. We're getting the kids outside as much as possible. So I think it goes back to that first question about protocols, right? All of those protocols have to be in place, and they have to be clear to everybody in the buildings if we're going to make this work. Otherwise, as we proceed, we may see the numbers spike locally, and we may have to shift to a remote model then.
Yeah. From what you're seeing from your other colleagues across the Commonwealth, how thus far has Fall River been organized compared to some others? Are we in a better position, you feel, than others? Are we about average? I mean, I'm sure you're talking with some of your colleagues across the state.
So I think we released our first draft of the plan, the superintendent did, maybe a little bit before some of the other districts. What I'm seeing now from other districts is a wide variety of plans. So I've heard that there's some considering a full in-person model, although, I'm not sure whether that will actually happen. Most of them seem to be recommending a hybrid model. And then a couple of them have recommended starting with all remote. So there doesn't seem to be any, consistency across the state, which is why I think the unions were really working with DESE to try to provide some standardization in certain aspects so that we were all doing the same thing. So that, like, if every district does that training period at the start of the school year, that gives our kids a lot more consistency as far as protocols and implementation go. But yeah, they're all over the place. They're all over the map with what they're doing. But I think we probably did release our plan a little bit earlier than others. Districts are required to submit final plans, which are far more detailed, to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education by August 10th. So we'll know more details by then.
Right. Now, getting back to some of the concerns of your members, if the city were to decide to start the school year, even remote for a short period of time, and then a hybrid model with those more needy students coming in full time at first. If you had a member who would be required in some ways to report to school in person that may have a pre-existing condition, how can that be handled in terms of, the health and safety of that instructor, that teacher, and or maybe his or her extended family, with the need of, meeting the needs of the students? I guess how will that eventually work itself out, I guess?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. And it's a very serious, very real question, because we know that people who have underlying pre-existing conditions are more likely to develop the virus than those who, although we are seeing younger, healthier people these days get the virus. But we can bargain over that issue when we bargain over the return to school. But the district has been clear that they want to work with us to help those people. We know that parents are going to have the right to not send their child back to school and instead engage in remote learning. So we would try to advocate for those teachers with health conditions or who live with people with health conditions to get first crack at those remote teaching positions. So, that would mean that they would be in a more sheltered environment, not exposed to as many kids. That's what, we would try to bargain for them. And the district has said they're going to do a survey probably this week of staff, because they're curious as well, how many people have health conditions that they're worried about returning to the buildings with.
Yeah. Rebecca Cusick, president of the Fall River Educators Association. Thank you for your time. It's good to get this perspective, and I'm sure we'll talk again before school starts. I appreciate your
Yeah.
time. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you. Take care. And I want to thank you for joining us on this telecast as we bring you information about not only public schools, but other events happening in the city of Fall River. I'm Keith Tebow. Have a great day.